Published 1742 Eastern Standard Time, the 10th of November 2018, updated 1853 Eastern Standard Time, the 10th of November 2018. Theresa May was on alert for government resignations after Joe Johnson's shock departure on Friday. Theresa May's hopes of striking a Brexit deal have been thrown into chaos after Brussels rejected an emergency plan designed to avert a cabinet split which could bring down her premiership. Downing Street had pinned its hopes of a breakthrough on a proposal drawn up by Attorney General Geoffrey Cox to placate Brexiteers fearful that the UK will be left as an EU vassal, but last night, sources in London and Brussels said that the EU had dismissed the Cox compromise, increasing the risk that the UK will now be forced into a no-deal Brexit. Number 10 sought to calm Tory MPs' nerves by insisting that the government would not strike an agreement at any cost and surrender to EU demands. However, Brexiteer Tories queued up to criticise Mrs May's handling of the negotiations as a shambles which was turning the UK into an international laughingstock. The tense deadlock came as Jacob Rees-Mogg, the powerful leader of arch-Brexit Tory MPs, offered Mrs May a way out of the impasse by calling for her to pay £20 billion to Brussels to secure a no-deal plus arrangement. Mrs May was on alert for fresh government resignations in the wake of Transport Minister Joe Johnson's shock departure on Friday over her deeply flawed negotiations. He said yesterday that other ministers were reflecting hard on their position. The PM's allies said any chance of the cabinet approving a draft deal in the next 48 hours were receding fast, potentially delaying the Crunch Commons vote until 2019. Number 10 pointed the finger at Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar for sabotaging the process. Anti-May MPs told colleagues to redouble their efforts to force the Prime Minister to quit by submitting letters of no confidence in her leadership. Outlining his surprise no-deal plus plan in today's Mail on Sunday, Mr Rees-Mogg, who is chairman of the Tories' European Research Group whose 80 members hold the Prime Minister's fate in their hands, suggests offering a sweetener to Brussels to make our departure as amicable as possible. The Brexiteer, who has previously argued against paying any of the planned £39 billion divorce bill to the EU, now argues £20 billion would be an acceptable sum to pay to mitigate against any unexpected effects of a no-deal Brexit. The ex-Transport Minister Mr Johnson said other ministers were now reflecting hard on their position. Fears have been raised of problems such as huge lorry queues leading into Dover and shortages of food and medicine. He writes in the Mail on Sunday, "It is time for convinced Brexiteers like me to compromise. So at this late hour in the negotiations, we would like to make a new, generous offer to break the deadlock, to achieve a no-deal plus. It would cost us money but it would finally dispel the crash-out project fear nightmare scenarios." Critics say the new plan still does not address the thorny issue of how to avoid a hard border in Ireland. Under its latest timetable, Number 10 had hoped to reach an agreement with the EU by the end of last week, to allow it to be put before the Cabinet by Tuesday. Brussels has privately told the government that if the green light is not given by Wednesday, it would be too late to trigger a vital EU summit before December, meaning that the Commons vote on the deal would be pushed back until after Christmas and perilously close to Brexit Day on March 29. Negotiations have been deadlocked over the EU's demand that the UK should stay within a temporary customs partnership as the backstop to avoid a hard border in Ireland if a long-term free trade deal cannot be agreed after the end of the transition period in 2020. Mr Johnson said on Saturday, "If others follow, good on them. Brexiteers want the right to leave the partnership as soon as possible, and without Brussels approval, the EU says that to do so would invalidate the backstop protection. If Mrs May agrees to indefinite membership of the partnership, which would mean accepting Brussels rules, she faces the prospect of a mass cabinet walkout and a likely leadership challenge." In an attempt to solve the problem, Mr Cox had drafted a proposal for an independent arbitration panel which would decide when the UK could leave the partnership without the EU having a right of veto, but senior government sources say the EU has now made it clear that only the European Court of Justice could make a ruling on EU laws, which would be unacceptable to Mrs May. Former Brexit Secretary David Davis condemned the EU position last night, saying it would completely betray the wishes of 17.4 million people who voted leave. Sources say Brussels is digging in on the issue at the behest of Mr Varadkar, who is sabotaging the process because he is playing to the domestic gallery in Dublin over a United Ireland. Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab alarmed the Irish last week by demanding any backstop should last just 3 months. Joe Johnson's resignation caused chaos in Downing Street, and even his father Stanley admits that it came as a surprise to him, dismissing claims that the family held a secret summit before the shock move. Environmentalist Stanley, pictured left with his son yesterday, said, "I was actually making a speech about gorillas when I got a message. Will this one end it?" Irish Premier Leo Varadkar was still claiming publicly last week that a Brexit deal by Christmas was more likely than not, but Tory Brexiteers suspect that in private he is the roadblock preventing Brussels from making vital concessions and allowing a deal to be signed off. Mr Varadkar rejected the idea that the UK could unilaterally call time on the Irish border backstop, and Number 10 says any hope of reaching an agreement before the EU's Wednesday deadline now rests on being able to win him round. The DUP, which is helping prop up Mrs May's government, has also stepped up the pressure by warning it will not tolerate any regulatory difference between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Joe Johnson, the Remain voting brother of former Foreign Secretary Boris, said yesterday that he knew some other ministers were reflecting hard on whether to accept Mrs May's position. He said, "If others follow, good on them." Last night, Tory arch-Brexiteer Peter Bone said, "Handled the right way, Brexit represents a glorious future for our nation, but the way some people in Number 10 are handling it is turning us into a laughing stock." Former Brexit Minister David Jones said Mrs May's original clarity on delivering Brexit has somehow been distorted into a plot so convoluted, it would have defeated the ingenuity of Lewis Carroll. Last night, a Number 10 source, who admitted that hopes of Cabinet agreeing to a deal by Tuesday were receding fast, said, "We should aim to conclude the withdrawal agreement as soon as possible, but we will not do this at any cost. There are a number of issues that need to be worked through on the Northern Ireland backstop, and these are the most difficult. They include ensuring that, if it is ever needed, it is not permanent and there is a mechanism to ensure the UK could not be held in the arrangement indefinitely."